Okay, we're going to get started. Please eat. Eat while I'm talking. The way this is going to work is that we don't really have a whole lot of time for, I want to get through the speakers and kind of get the groundwork laid so we have time for Q&A in the end. So I've really got to rock and roll. The speakers have got to rock and roll. We have it timed so that the food's coming in now. Then they're going to come in when I break 15 minutes from now. They're going to come in and whisk away the food. Then we're going to do drink refills after Shayna. Shayna's going to go next. And then Peggy, and then Jason. So we got it all figured out. We got to do a little bit of a mic switch in between people. So that's a chance if you have a little bio break or need to raise your hand and say hi there. If you need to raise your hand and walk out and get a drink refill, if you can't wait till the break, that's fine too. So I want to give a little bit of a foundation about the Singularity, about sponsors, about myself, just to kind of form a little bit of a foundation as we get started here. And we'll talk about a little bit about what the local chapter is. And in addition to that, we're going to introduce the speakers. So one of the pieces about Singularity, so Singularity is an organization based out of Silicon Valley. It was founded by Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil. If you've read the book Singularity is Near, and you can Google Peter Diamandis. He's involved in a million different endeavors. But they put this together as an organization that understands and teaches and educates about exponential technologies and, with the big and, how to use them for good. How do we actually use them to solve challenges, big global challenges, big problems? They like to solve it for $1 billion. So all their programs are designed to use exponential technology to solve and help 1 billion people. I like to reverse engineer that locally. It might be 10, it might be 1 million, it might be 10 million. But either way, we're using technologies to amplify benefit. Okay, so that's a major piece. And they're involved in a wide variety of different areas from education, energy, environment, food, global health, poverty, security, space, and water. So those are the kind of big umbrellas. As far as that's kind of the bigger umbrellas. I'm going to give you more of the practical technologies that come out of that, like VR and AR and deep learning and machine learning and all the pieces that come out. But that's at a high level. That's what it is. So what is the local chapter? The local chapter is I decided to form it because I went to Singularity, went through their executive program, and became a part of their leadership team for the Washington D.C. And my goal is really to run the leadership and the governance and practical execution. So the leadership is really just forming a container so we can run these exponentials monthly in themed events and have it done in a way that's executed every single month for people. And the governance is really to sit there and go, there's a lot of cool, very interesting technologies that are coming around that have a lot of amplified good, but they also need to be governed. There needs to be a governance piece to this and an ethics around it as well. So it's two parts to the conversation. We're not ignoring the ethics and the governance. It's a part of the dialogue, but we're also going to be talking about the good, which in this town is a threat-based town. I mean, we can all agree to that. So we're not going to necessarily be riding the threat bandwagon. Okay, we're going to understand it and educate people about it so that they understand where the good's going, and then we're going to be understanding the governance of it as well. How are we going to do that? My goal is to bring business leaders, entrepreneurs, associations, government, and all together. And so the big thing that I'm getting feedback from people is not just talking about the theory, not just talking about the cool, interesting things, but like how we can marry that to practical execution. What are people doing locally? What are people doing that it's innovative? There's some seats right in the back if you're missing some. What are we doing that's real? And that's a big thing, because when I go to Singularity, when I go to Silicon Valley, they're all about understanding it, but then they're about the execution, making these ideas real and making them solve problems for people. That's the piece that I want to bring here. And so that's marrying both enterprise people that want to understand how they innovate with their organizations and versus the startup. And can they form relationships with startups at the enterprise level? And can we form these relationships with government and local businesses? So we're doing this on monthly chapter meetings, and we're doing this on virtual meetings, and we're also going to be having a global impact challenge where we're going to put a team together to evaluate 10 companies here locally that are doing very, very interesting things in exponentials and then they'll give them the opportunity to win the award to go to Singularity Corporate and work on a 10-week program to build their technology and scale it with the knowledge and resources that are there. So I'm not going to talk about team building now, but this is going to take a big team. I have my team here that I hope you can say hello to. Alyssa and Patrick have been huge, instrumental of pulling this off. We're streaming this live, so if you don't want your face streamed live, you probably shouldn't be here. We won't be able to block it out. So, but it takes more than just this team. This team is just to get it started. We're going to need media. I'm going to need representative of enterprise. We're going to need, actually Roberto's jumped in. He's going to help us find space, because we want to find a regular recurring space as we grow this. You can see we're kind of packed in with 40 people or so. But as we go to 100 or 200, we're going to need a bigger facilities. So Roberto's helping. Jason's been a huge help. Jason's running the largest VR community in DC right now. What's the name of it? VR DC, right? DCVR. So Jason and I had coffee out at Singularity Global Summit that was about a month ago. And so Jason not only runs his VR community, but he really wants to help and grow the Singularity. Singularity is a bit of a broader message. So we're not linked to any specific, there's no specific technologies. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my area within Singularity, within my organization, but Jason's and clearly Shayna's and also Peggy's is within virtual reality. Okay, so I want to give a little bit of overview about what an exponential is. Everybody know what this is? Gutenberg Press, right? So this was the technology in 1440 that completely democratized access to education, and it completely changed the knowledge was not going to be held with clerics, with scribes. If you look at the old literature, they were completely upset with this. They did not like the fact that they were being taken out of being able to do only the handwriting was for them. This is an example that completely changed humanity. So some of the areas right now that we're involved in, we have about 13, I hear different estimates, about 13 Gutenberg press moments going on concurrently right now that are going to impact humanity at different levels. And so I want everybody to understand this. I want everybody to learn about this. You can't do it in one session, one hour session, but VR is obviously one of those big impact areas that has an impact now, and then as we go 5 years from now, 10 years from now. How many of you know the real internet, the real one that was like dialing the modem and you could hear that connection into, I was living in McLean, connecting into the servers at AOL was in 95, right? With the launch of Windows 95. Everything before that was pure geek, right? And then all of a sudden Windows 95 hit. How would we like to have been involved in those technologies right prior to 95, maybe 91, 92, 93, 94, 95 for the launch? A lot of these are going on right now. And so artificial intelligence, machine learning, you guys can read the list here. So an example of this is going to be Kodak. Kodak was a 140,000 employee company, multi-billions, and then in 96, 2012, had 700 employees, and then was upended by Instagram. So they're out of business now. And they had all the patents. They had all the IP. Alyssa, can you make sure that when I get 5 minutes left, you let me know? Thank you. So disruption, another example of disruption is a lot of times the technical is disrupting physical, and that's a big component of this. So record stores upended by iTunes, bookstores upended by Amazon, Skype long distance, changing how we make long distance calls around the world, Craigslist upending classifieds, Google and eBay. So a lot of it's a physical component being upended by digital. We see that with Uber, right? We see that with Airbnb. Airbnb owns how many hotels? Zero. Goose egg, exactly. And yet they have the highest valuation of any of the hotels. I think it might even be combined, but certainly bigger than Hyatt. Big deal. So how many of you know that, so is Uber, the big win for disruption for Uber is in the taxi industry, of course. This is a big problem for the taxi industry. How many of you know that algorithm that services a taxi, they're going to be into FedEx, and they're going to be into all sorts of delivery. What other industries are going to be potentially disrupted by Uber? So this is what we're exploring. And why do we use the word exponential and disruptive? Because if you take 30 linear steps, it goes this type of pattern. When you look at 30 exponential steps, you go 26 times around the Earth. And so that's why we use this concept of exponentials, because before, when it's a linear progress, like when you looked at the innovation of an axe, how long did it take the axe to evolve? It would take thousands of years for it to go from stone to wood to... Now, in this span of 6 months, we are innovating. We think we have a solid feeling around our businesses, but then all of a sudden, things get disrupted. So what we want to do is, this is an example. The telephone has too many shortcomings to be taken seriously as a means of communication. This was in 1876. There's no reason for anyone to want a computer in their home, by Ken Olsen in 1977. The average lifespan of a company in the S&P 500 is decreased from 67 years to 15 years. So these are some real, so there's difference between soft and hard facts. These are hard facts. Now where in these shifts are we seeing hard changes happening? And this is the disruption piece. This is how many of you said, there's no way, when you had your phone in the 90s, there's no way there's going to be transactions, you're going to do any transactions over your phone. How many of you raised your hand? Raise your hand if you thought that this was never going to happen. Well, I certainly didn't believe it was going to happen. How many of you thought that was, how many of you the phone is the primary means of communication? How many of you thought in 2000 that was going to be, or 2005? How many of you absolutely knew that was going to be the primary form of I didn't think it was going to be. So it stayed quiet. It stayed quiet. A lot of these capabilities stay quiet, and then boom, they take us over. And so that's what is part of this, of Singularity, and part of what I want to do is help people understand where they are in this disruption curve so they can pick the upward trend for themselves personally, for their businesses, for their organizations, and know when that cross happens for you, no matter where that may be. So that because this can be chaotic and overwhelming, but this can seem boring and unnoticeable. So that's a major piece that we focus on, is really understanding those trends. Obviously, computer networks are what's propelling this. And you can see the trend and exponentials. Many of you are aware of Moore's Law. The reason we're here is because of Moore's Law. How much time do I have? 5, nice. So Osborne computers in the 1982 weighed 28 pounds, cost $5,000. 25 years, and had 124K of memory. In 2007, $500 for the iPhone, 150 times faster, and had 4 gigs. Now we're moving into infinite computing, cloud-based computing. We're not really tracking how much space we have because we have unlimited space. And the DEC, an IBM 350 in 1956, had 5 megabytes, cost $120,000. Now we can get, in 2014, 128 gigs for $100. So this is these are the pieces that are shifting a lot of this for us. So one of the big pieces in this town is permissionless, and the governance is a big piece of this. Is that in France, when we had the riots around taxis, there was Uber didn't go in and ask for permission from the French government and legislators. When Uber's not allowed to run taxi services in Las Vegas or in any town, it's putting lots of pressure on our government institutions to really keep pace. I know the FCC, I think it was the FCC. Who governs drones? Was it FCC? FCC. The FCC did not want to put drones on the top of its agenda this year, guaranteed. But that's the pressure that these upward sloping technologies are having.
FCC governs the comms, and FAA.
FAA, yeah. But I can guarantee from both, they didn't want to deal with it this year. They would rather deal with other things but this is pushing so fast, it's changing our government, it's changing our legislation and our governance of these technologies. So a little bit about our sponsor, and a little bit, I'm gonna blend who I am and a little bit of the sponsorship into this. I founded this, and people are wondering, like, why did you do this? One of the big reasons is that I'm in technology. I've been in technology for 20 plus years. My company does IT security, which is one of the disrupting areas that we're all feeling right now, is that sliver of all the areas we're talking about. Security is obviously a big deal, and my company is firmly entrenched in that world. So primarily with enterprise IT security decision makers. And so I've spent my time working with CIOs and CISOs, helping them govern and track technologies that impact security and govern across their organizations. And I do a lot of writing and speaking about this, particularly at the boardroom, at the CIO level. Who would have thought IT security would have been at the boardroom level? It is now, and it's a lot of these technologies are forcing way up the value chain from pure tech geek areas completely because of the disruptive problems. I also run a podcast. This podcast is super cool, super interesting. I highly encourage you to download it. The Stoic philosophy and ethics of programming and AI. I had a fantastic conversation with a philosopher, because a lot more philosophy majors now going into school because we're having to deal with philosophical, how do you program AI in a world where human beings aren't necessarily making all the decisions. Inevitable technology forces changing and shaping our future with Kevin Kelly. Awesome author and a thought leader. He actually was the founder of Wired magazine many years ago. So I try to bring on some of the best influencers. Some of them are exponential focused, some are tech focused, some are leadership, but that's what I like to do on my podcast. I also, one of the big interests I have is the neuroscience changes. So the changes in leadership styles that we need to have as we govern our startups, as we govern our organizations, is completely different than it was a few years ago. We have to have concepts of innovation at the edge of our organizations, and we have to think exponentially, and that's a skill. That's not something we're born with. Some people are born with it, very few. So I do a lot of things to amplify that and to continue to learn how to think exponentially. And one of them is getting people like this together to think in this way. Goose egg? Okay. So these are some things that I do personally to kind of keep sharp. So anybody wants to communicate with me afterwards, I'm going to move on to, but you can follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter or a whole bunch of channels, but I want to move on to the rest of the presentations right now. Good time to take a break if anybody wants a break. Otherwise, we're going to move right into Shayna.